What is coming up today? Right, well, we will be joined by the very lovely Godfrey Bloom, love Godfrey, who's going to be doing a very serious breakdown of what is taking place this week in the UK from the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And we, of course, will have a budget. And Godfrey is the man for the job, frankly.
Love.
Here he is, the wonderful Godfrey Godders Bloom. How are you, Godders?
I'm very well, my dear. Thank you. I've got my Robin Day glasses on today, and I've got a tie on in honour of you.
You're looking very esteemed, I should say. People, we are talking about a man with a very rich history. Goddess these days is not just an author and a journalist, but of course, the author of this book, as I've told you already. But the thing about you, Godfrey, is your life is so well lived, for want of a better description. You have experience in military, in politics, in banking, all of the things that are utterly important and vitally important right now to have some knowledge of. Just before we start, any one of them stand out to you as your favourite career?
Oh, what a that moved off the seam at me a little bit. I have to say, it's a very good question, which I can't answer for the simple reason, every sort of period, I then change and do something else because I get bored and I have to move on. And so consequently, everything to me is fresh. So,
Nice.
The City of London was absolutely magnificent because you feel you're at the heart of the world. And politics was interesting because I had absolutely no idea just how stupid mainstream politicians are. And it's only till you sit down across the table maybe and have a glass of wine or some dinner with them, you realize just how stupid they are. Military, I have to say, my undistinguished career in the military was great fun, probably for all the wrong reasons.
Well, you say undistinguished, but it wasn't at all. You're very self-deprecating. One of my favorite things that you did, because of course, when you were in politics, you were infamous and in all the right ways, as far as I'm concerned. And one of the things that you did, you were ejected from Mansion House, weren't you, for heckling Lord Turner? Do you remember that?
Oh, yes, that was marvellous. There he was trying to pretend he'd just given all his staff a bonus in 2008. Having presided over the biggest cock-up in banking regulation in the history of this country, and that is difficult. And I know the rule is silence in the Mansion House. I simply couldn't sit there and let it go. I got chucked out.
But that's what we like about you, is that you pull no punches. And that is really appreciated because we are surrounded by politicians that nobody can trust, bankers that nobody can trust, military that nobody can trust, and yet people trust you. So on that note, let us talk about what is happening this week in the UK. And the first thing that hit me this morning, Godfrey, were the headlines. Keir Starmer demands Brits face up to harsh reality and pay more tax in speech today ahead of brutal 35 billion budget raid. They're preparing us, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And I have said for many years, what we need as a Chancellor of the Exchequer is a Yorkshire housewife who is used to budgeting, budgeting her balance and balancing her budget and so this. You will notice that in this election that's just gone by and the previous election, and the election before that, nobody ever talks about cutting spending. What they do is they talk about raising taxes through growth, this magic thing, growth. But of course, they don't facilitate growth because they've never worked in the private sector, in the wealth creating sector. We have a cabinet where nobody has even run a Welk store. So how can you get economic growth from people with absolutely no experience? So it's more tax and more tax. It's more tax on the same people. It's the wealth creating sector. What is the wealth creating sector? It's the little lady who's got a chair in a hairdresser's shop. It's somebody with a corner shop. It's all this economy that we have is all about small businesses. And of course, this government are only interested in corporations. And we see that in everything they do. If I were Chancellor and I put my Yorkshire housewife hat on, this is where I just made a little note of what they get rid of money on. Ed Miliband's Green Initiative has cost 8 billion since he came in. And who's it for? For the mates who build wind turbines, who give money to the Labour Party. Are you watching this? Are you going to sue me for slander? Hey? No, you're not, are you? Because I can prove it all. We send 3 billion via the Ukraine to the United States arms manufacturers. 3 billion. Here's another one. 1 billion, just under £1 billion a month in foreign aid, which is unaudited. It's not audited. We don't know where it goes. We know Miliband's brother gets a good share of it, don't we? We've got climate change here. We're sending money to stop the sun shining in Africa. That's 10 billion. Stop the sun. You couldn't invent this. The World Green Fund, you would have spotted, perhaps, that had 31 billion pounds gone missing from the World Bank Green Fund. I mean, how much did we put into that? And we don't even know where it's gone. He's given the public sector 5% increase. Now, what people don't take into consideration, not only has that cost billions by giving them 5%, every man jack of them, and at latest count, that's 6 million, are going to have an index-linked pension. So our children and our grandchildren are going to be lemoned with these huge pension bills, which enable public sector workers to retire at 55 and actually, after 10 years in retirement, earn more than they got when they were actually working. We've got aircraft carriers floating around the Mediterranean. Of course, it's the Western Mediterranean, because everybody knows, and I speak as a military man, that they could be sunk in 20 minutes by anybody who wants to. They're totally obsolete and unbelievably expensive. And now she tells us we're in such a tight spot, she's going to borrow another 50 billion. 50 billion, which of course needs to be raised. Now you either print it or you pay interest on it. This is the economics of the madhouse. Now, before everybody gets their knickers in a twist about this, the last lot were no better. Hunt was no better. We live in a kleptocracy, and they take the money from the same people all the time. Pensioners, small businesses, ordinary workers on the minimum wage, or perhaps not just even the minimum wage, the ordinary average wage. They just screw us over time and time again. We're the highest tax now. We are higher taxed than we have ever been in our history, certainly in my lifetime. It's got to end somewhere.
And I don't think people are getting their knickers in a twist. People are delighted to see you on here, as I say, pulling no punches. Absolutely, Stephen. He is a great guest. We appreciate him very much, very much. And so Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is telling us this is a budget for strivers, right? That's what she says. But this really appears to me to be, as you're saying, this is an attack on the ordinary average working man and woman again, isn't it? That's really the reality.
Yes, and we don't know yet, but we strongly suspect that employers' national insurance stamps are going to be put up. Now, I hate this word national insurance. It's a nice, warm, cuddly word. It's a tax, people. It's a tax, all right? And here's in, if you extend it, it's a tax on jobs. Can you imagine anything more stupid if you want to grow an economy than taxing jobs? So anybody in the private sector who's going to say, I was going to give people a 4 or 5% interest rate, to cover inflation this year, I can't do it. It's going to be 2% at best because they've taken that money off me. And I think the average figure lately has been £800 per year per worker.
Wow.
So small businesses just can't afford it. Yeah. It's utterly madness, and we're still going ahead with railways to nowhere, which cost billions and billions.
Absolutely. What did you think when they first went into number 10 and Rachel Reeves and all of them start talking about this 22 billion black hole? What was your response to that?
Well, I was on an Any Questions program once when Rachel Reeves was elected. Shortly after she was elected, I was on the panel. Or some sort of program of that nature. I'm going back when she was just elected. And the moderator, who was BBC, whose name escapes me for the moment, and of course, needless to say, the BBC hate my guts. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Good.
But
badge of honor.
Even he came up to me and he said, bloody hell, he said, Rachel's got a lot to learn, isn't she? She's not the sharpest pencil in the box. And I would argue this again, frankly, I think she's in some sort of weird way slightly retarded. I mean, she must know. Now, let's just take everybody watching your program this morning has been through a patch where they have to, balance their budget. I have. We all have. I left the city when I was on big salaries to start my own business, my own small business, and that was a heavy cross to bear. So my salary was monstrously slashed, and so I had to really cut my cloth. Now, if you are in that situation and you have 2 cars, you get rid of a car. Your family makes do with 1 car. You forget your really expensive holidays. And if you're a businessman and trying to struggle through a business, you forget flying first class or business class. You forget the 4-star hotels, and what you do is you cut your cloth until your business gets off the ground. We all have to cut our cloth from time to time, and at the moment, that's most of us if you're not in the public sector. Now, this is the problem that we don't have. We don't have business experience in politics, and we don't have housewives. I've got a big brief for housewives, because housewives know how to stretch a budget. Rachel Reeves hasn't a clue.
That is the reality. I mean, that is actually the reality. I can juggle like nobody's business when I have to, because we learn to, don't we? And I doubt that she's ever learned to. And you're right, she doesn't have a clue. But the thing is, one of the things that they're going to be attacked on is it would appear, and I know this is no surprise to anybody, but they're breaking their election promises, aren't they? The whole idea was they weren't going to increase taxes on working people, including national insurance and income tax. And now they're talking about extending the income tax freeze, and that means that we'll pay more on our earnings, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, what we used to have, of course, was the base camp, which years ago was sort of 12 grand. So it went up with inflation in order that people weren't sucked into a high rate tax. It was never the original intention to put ordinary folk on round about the national average wage into high rate tax. I don't believe in high rate tax anyway, but even that's the case. Now it's sucking in more and more people will be paying part of their income in high rate tax. How do they imagine that increasing employers' national insurance isn't going to impact on the employee? How could it not? How could it not?
Right.
Exactly. And of course, VAT, I was a great Brexiteer, as you know. VAT was an invention of the European Union. We should get rid of 20%. Everything we buy, from frying pans to saucepans or whatever it is, it's got 20%. You buy a new car because the old one's really knackered after 4 or 5, 6 years, and you want to replace the car. An average family car now through inflation is £30,000. You're paying £6,000 in VAT. Never mind on the petrol and your tax to use the road, which doesn't go on roads, does it? We know it doesn't go on roads by looking at the potholes. We live in a kleptocracy. Right. We live in a kleptocracy. And I don't know whether any of your viewers spotted my interview with Professor Dutton, Ed Dutton, which
we'll put a link in the description. Is it on your channel? Yes,
it is. It's fascinating because he's a sort of psychologist. He's a highly qualified man, but he's not a trick cyclist, with a certificate. He does other things. So I won't go into the details. I don't know if I fully understand it, but he's a big lecturer and he's a professor and all that kind of thing. And he says the problem with all these people, and we were actually having a crack at Starmer in particular, who had his mother unfortunately had rheumatoid arthritis, and he was a very young boy when he had to look after his mother. So you had this role reversal. Well, this means, of course, he hasn't been brought up in a normal family circumstance, so he's not empathetic to ordinary people. These people are flawed. Politicians, generally speaking, are sociopaths. For the simple reason, in what other profession is your colleague your enemy? Your colleague, backstabbing is what it's all about. And I know I've been through all this. I was in politics for 10 years. If you want to get up the greasy pole, the way to do it is you stab your mate in the back.
Yes,
that's how you do it. That means you've got to be a sociopath to be successful. Blair, Boris, don't fall for all that fluffy, jolly chap thing. The man's a sociopath.
People want you back in politics, Godders. Our chat wants you back in politics. Any chance of that?
No, no, I'm 75 next week.
Who cares? You don't look 75, does he? Nobody does not look 75. You don't sound 75. Yes, Mel, he's absolutely on fire this morning. So here's the thing, right, is that even though we're talking about Rachel Reeves being the Chancellor and everything, you and I know that we are all part of a sort of global construct. It was interesting to me that she headed off to the States last week, went to talk to the IMF. What do you think? How much influence do you really think she has on this budget as opposed to people beyond her?
Well, of course, you've put your finger on it, Sonia, there. Of course, she has the Treasury have to actually crunch the numbers and do the business. She's too thick, to be brutally frank. She's just too thick. So she's got all these people behind her. Now, here's the problem. The days we still live in the world of Sir Humphrey Bumphrey, you know, from the wonderful program. The trouble is, all our institutions, particularly our civil service, have been infiltrated by corporatists, by people who have a loyalty elsewhere. It's either in medicine, it's to the WHO. In politics, it's to the WEF, or it's the UN. And so it goes on and so it goes on. These people don't even pretend to be interested in us. They don't care about us. They care about the international situation, their international bosses, Klaus Schwab, and I'm sorry to say the King, King Charles III, who I wouldn't pay in shirt buttons. What has he got to do with his subjects? At least he should have something in common with his subjects. I mean, a king should think, well, my subjects are my first priority. He doesn't even pretend to think like that.
No, not my
and he's
king.
he's worried about climate change all the time. He's just bought a private jet.
I know. You and I talked about him before because you are formally a supporter of royalty, right? But you said when it came to him, you simply could not support him. Just for the benefit of our viewers, really, why is that? Is it because he's all part of that agenda, or is there something else?
He's part of the agenda. I think he's another man who had a difficult background, a difficult upbringing. The Duke was a tough guy. He was a sailor. He was quite a distinguished Royal Naval officer. He had a son that just, isn't that kind of material. He sent him to Gordonston, which is a roughy, toughy school in the north of Scotland, totally unsuited to a sort of a delicate plant like King Charles III. And so consequently, the guy's completely at sea, and he's fluffy, huggy, but he's a fraud. He's a fraud. He has Aston Martins, he has Bentleys, he has a private jet. We can't even count how many houses he's got and castles. We can't. He's the richest man in the world. Tell me, is he going to eat bugs? Is he going to have nothing and be happy? Or are we all having too many children? Oh, but not the royal family.
No, absolutely not.
They breed like rabbits. Now, it's got to be, if it's sauce for the goose, it's got to be sauce for the gander, hasn't it? So he's not setting an example. And we've had previous monarchs, I would say, King George in the war, for example, and the Queen Mum set a wonderful example to us and led us through very, very difficult times. But these comedians, these Windsors, who are parvenus, if you look at royal families across the world, they're complete parvenus. I mean, Saxe-Coburgs, really. They've only just turned up from Germany. Mickey Mouse. So consequently, I'd bring back the Plantagenets.
You are on form this morning. Did the missus put something in your coffee, goddess? But I mean, the reality is we do need more people who are prepared to speak out like you, because I think we're in a fairly dreadful situation, all things considered. Keir Starmer came in with less than 20% of the votes, and we've seen what he's like ruling with this. He's got a very punishing head on him, hasn't he? It's obvious he was a former DPP, because everything is about punishment. I'm taking you slightly off tangent here, because I just would like your feedback on it. In terms of his period in office since July, what do you think about the attack on people who are kind of raising up and wanting to talk about immigration?
I think if you are prepared to release men who savagely beat their wives from prison, to replace them with grandparents who are actually quite ill for turning up and shouting hurty words at the police for 2 years or 2.5 years or whatever it happens to be, is disgraceful. It's scandalous. It's scandalous. And I think sooner or later, the great sleeping electorate in this country should actually hand out the same punishments to these people as they handed out to King Charles I. Would be a good start. Bit of a chopping block. But in the modern world, if you don't want to incite violence, and I don't want to incite violence, let's exile him like we did the Duke of Windsor, who was another pain in the arse. Let's send him to some sunny island where King Strutton pose and sponge off his friends. Let's get rid of all these people. And I think we need to start doing it before it's too late. We are getting to the stage where it could be too late.
Yeah, I think we're in dire straits right now, and I'm really deeply concerned about this week because there is no care. As you say, these people are completely out of touch. They don't know what it's like to really truly balance a budget, to sit down at the kitchen table and work out which bill you're going to be paying first this month. They have no idea about any of those things. And so I am deeply concerned about this attack on people, on all working people. And of course, we've seen various attacks. They're also talking about this whole idea, right, about putting a huge volume of money in the NHS, but we've already seen where they want to put it, right? They want to put it in smartwatches. They want to put it into a digital future in the NHS. Now, God, as you and I have talked about the NHS before, what do you think should be done with it?
I think it needs dismantling and we have to start again. That's what I believe. My wife worked for some years as a physiotherapist in the NHS, gave up on it. And we got lots of friends who are doctors and GPs. They're friends of mine, so they will say the same thing. They think it can be reformed. It can't be reformed. We have to start again. How can we have a health service with 1.2 million people employed by it, less than half of whom have any medical qualification of any sort? How come it be now we've got to 170 billion pounds to pay for the NHS? You could give every family in the land something like 10,000 pounds a year to put in their pocket to pay for their health if and as and when they need it. The whole thing's scandalous, but then what organization run by the government isn't a shambles? Any government.
It is deeply concerning right now. I feel so frustrated as a taxpayer. I feel that I'm literally just handing over my money to crooks. And I've pretty much always felt like that all my working life, in all fairness. But now it's so transparently obvious that our money is being spent in ways that is completely contrary to the British people. The amount of money actually going overseas is quite shocking, isn't it? And as a military man, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think we ought to perhaps look at it. I've always been against a written constitution because I think we want to have a perfectly good constitution. But I would make it fundamental that we are not allowed to send any money abroad under any circumstances until we've got our own house in order. And if we didn't send all this money abroad, working women could retire at 65. We would have better care and better everything would be better if we had it there. But it's not just a question of money. It has to be organization. The NHS isn't failing just because it doesn't have enough money. It has plenty of money. It has people who have taken it over. Just to leave the listeners perhaps with this, the average salary for an administrator is £69,000. The average salary for a theatre nurse is £33,000. What kind of lunacy is that?
Yes, I saw a job advert yesterday. I will bring it up later, but I think it was for a new equity and diversity officer. And I think they were in the NHS. I think it was 143,000. I will double check that later. But we've no use for anything like that. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Absolutely ridiculous. And also, oh, here we go. Let me put up so many comments today. Brilliant. Thank you so much. But also, I just want to remind people of something that you did. And that was when you were an MEP. What did you do about expenses?
When I was an MEP, I didn't take an MEP's salary on a matter of principle. My attendance allowances I gave fully audited to Yorkshire charities. And I didn't take the pension, the non-contributory index, because that's impossible for anybody else to get, any of my constituents to get. So I didn't take any of that. I did take for the Ministry of Justice a smaller sum in order just so that I could actually pay my bills at home. But that was a matter of principle. What a waste of time that was, because nobody gave a shit. Nobody bothered. They wouldn't publish it or anything like that. And I wasn't alone, incidentally. there were others who took the same moral high ground, but I didn't take out of it. So people say, "Oh, you're all right, Godfrey. You were in there 10 years." No, I didn't milk it. I didn't cheat.
No, you didn't.
I played with a straight bat. But we live in a world now playing with a straight bat doesn't get you anywhere, really, does it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to live with ourselves. We have to be able to sleep. We have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror. So I think on a personal level, it most certainly does, because integrity is so vital in a world that seems to be integrity less. And I do consider you as somebody with integrity. I remember, I mean, I've said this to you before, and that is mainstream media taught me to dislike you. Told me that you were the enemy of people like me. And then when I started to get to know you, I was like, he's all right. He's not the way they've portrayed him. And actually, he's somebody with a really good sense of humor, and you use it to maximum impact. So, Godfrey, round it up for me. What this week, if it is the worst of what you've been saying that we experience, how can we protect ourselves? What can we as working people do?
It's very difficult for ordinary people who don't have much assets to move. I'm a gold bug, as you know, and so I've been very keen on gold. So it protects against currency depredation. So stack up the larder with, tin grub and all the rest of it, because grub is only going to get more expensive. They're having a big assault on our farmers. They're having a big assault on we've got to register our chickens now. Why do they want that? So they can turn up and pull their necks. My farming friends around me tell me they're being paid to grow wildflowers instead of actually food. And so it goes on. But my advice to anybody watching this now, okay, it's Monday and the weekend's a fair way away. I should spend this coming weekend getting completely and totally pissed.
That was so unexpected. Oh, it's so wonderful to have you with us, everybody. This is the remarkable Godfrey Bloom, and he is on fire this morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Godfrey.
Great
Wonderful.
pleasure as always.
Lovely. Wonderful. Isn't he on fire? Yes, he is. Brilliant. Take care. Thank you.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based. And I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.